So I feel like there's this common trend in families. I would say almost every single family on the earth where the child grows into a teenager and the parent and the child really start butting heads and it becomes almost like an insufferable relationship.
Mm.
Um the kids like they leave the home, they start their own lives. And the relationships that they have with their parents then become less
Yeah.
contentious. And then it's more of they're basically they're on better terms.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the factors that cause this to happen?
For me, I needed space. That was what helped me. I don't know if I'd say I was a difficult child. I was a weird child. I very methodically pushed the boundaries. So I was an okay teenager, but I definitely was not the easiest to get along with. And coming to college was really helpful because I was able to be my own person and see what my parents had taught me in the home and how different that was from other people. Of course, having roommates, you learn very quickly what other people are used to in their homes. And so it's like, oh, I'm actually grateful that I was raised the way I was because I know how to do this. I know how to do that. These are my expectations. So I became more aware of the blessings that I have because of my parents. And I also was able to take a step back and see the big picture more than just that snapshot of my teenage childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was more I didn't like to be told to do something. Like I didn't like. And sometimes you have to do things even if you don't understand the reason why. I remember when my mom was like, "Oh, you have to clean your room." Oh my gosh, I would be so like, "No, I don't have to." But then like Kelly said, looking back, I think now, of course, I have a better picture of that period of time because I think I didn't understand that I was responsible for, in this case, in my story, responsible for my house. And I didn't care that much, and I didn't like when, because in my mind was like, oh, I will do it when I want to do it. Like I will set up my own time, I will set up my own schedule. I will do it when I decide to do. But sometimes my mom didn't agree with that, so that was hard growing up.
And I think teenagers are realizing that they have autonomy
Yeah.
and they're advocating for that for themselves.
Anxious to use it.
Yeah, exactly. They're wanting to use it more and more often and more frequently, and I think that, and then parents are not ready to let go because at the end of the day they, in a way, still do know more. They have the knowledge. They were teenagers once. They understand their child's they can understand their child's experiences from their own lens, but it can be a little difficult for the parent to understand the child from the child's lens, if that makes sense, because they aren't the same people, and they're not going to have the exact same experiences, even coming from the same family. But my point is that they're wanting that autonomy, and the parents aren't ready to give it totally, and the teens want it, but it's just that battle. And then once they're able to leave the house, they can utilize their autonomy. And then, like you said, they have roommates and they meet people who were raised differently from them, and they see the good that their parents did that they might not have been able to see before because they were fighting so heavily for that freedom.
Yeah. There's just a very unique sense of spite that teenagers have. And I'm saying that for myself. Like I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to experiment. I wanted to see what would happen if I did the exact opposite of what my parents said. And I think it's not the most convenient way to learn, but it sure is poignant when you've actually lived through your mistakes. You see, right, you reap what you sow. You've seen what's come up and you go, okay, I don't want that. Like I'm good. I've tried that. I'm not interested in that result. I think it's a good lesson to learn, even if it's hard for parents to watch. Like, man, we told you not to do that. Why are you trying this? But at least for myself, at least I know now. That's kind of how I see it. I'm grateful for even the mistakes that I made because I'm a better person because of it.
Yeah.
And you have that clarity. You can see your parents a little more clearly. Like their efforts and what they did and what they tried to do for you in raising you. Yeah. And I think that parents can also see in those situations, they can see their children a little bit more clearly. I'm Savannah.
I'm Kallie.
I'm Erica.
And this is Head Over Feels. Today we're talking about the parent-child relationship.
So just to start, there is the Arbinger Institute that I really like. We've learned a lot about their ideas in our major, and they essentially handle mediation skills, conflict resolution. They're marketed towards more of a workforce environment, kind of more like a career, like HR type thing, but they've got plenty of books. Anatomy of Peace is one that comes to mind that really can be applied to parents. I think marriages as well. Our last episode was all about marriage, and there were a lot of great principles that go hand in hand with what we're talking about today. But what I really wanted to focus on with them was in Anatomy of Peace, they have this concept called the boxes of justification. And there's 4 of them, and I'll just talk about 2 of those today. But the reason why I want to talk about these 2 is because these were boxes that my mom and I were in towards each other. And I'll explain what that means. So to be in a box towards someone essentially means that you have a mindset about that relationship that impacts how well you can see that person as a person and not an object. So the first box that I wanted to talk about is the better than box, which sounds exactly how it is. It's you think you're better, you think you're superior, other people are inferior. Let's see, like it's you're impatient with other people's efforts because they're not enough. It's like, why can't you be on my level, kind of thing. And you're very competitive. I saw myself as better than my mom for a good amount of my life, which I can see why, because as personalities, I have more of a like intellectual personality than she does, and so I do tend to retain information better. I like talking about scholarly things, and that's something my dad and I bonded over. And so it was very, very common at the dinner table for her to get lost in our conversation. So my dad and I would be talking, and she'd be like, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was kind of just like, well, I sucks. Like I don't know what, why aren't you there? Why aren't you on my level? And so I was not able to see her needs as valid because I was thinking, she's just not where I'm at. I don't know why you don't get me. I don't know why you're not thinking the way that I do or as quickly. And so I would leave her behind a lot. And that did not do good things for our relationship. It caused me to have a lot of pride. I would see myself as better. And that meant that everything she did wasn't good enough. It was like, oh, well, you should have done this. Why didn't you do that? And of course, as a mom, you're already feeling inadequate. Like, you have one of the hardest jobs in the world. And to have your own child be saying, like, you should have done this, but I just can't imagine how that even felt. But luckily, I've figured out a few things. It's taken a few years, but just an example, like a few months ago, we were talking to her on the phone, my husband and I, and she made some comment about, oh, Boise's this far away, place in Idaho, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but I essentially kind of said, like, oh, we know, like we've been there before, like you don't have to tell us, and and then my mom was like, well, we've done a few trips, through Boise. And I was realizing, like, yeah, they've literally taken my sisters and me through college, and they lived, like, it's just like, oh, yeah, they have way more experience, like decades of experience more than I do. And so I just felt so foolish. And then a few days later, I ended up calling her and was like, hey, I'm sorry for getting kind of snippy about that. Like, I realized, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I didn't need to bring that attitude to the table. So That's just a little example, but that's one way I've been able to repair that better than box, is by apologizing and by realizing I'm not inherently better than you just because I happen to know some things, and she knows other things too. Her collection of knowledge is different than mine. It's not worse. It's not better. It's different. There's no value that you need attached to either. We just know about different things. That's okay. The other box that I wanted to talk about is the I deserve box, which is essentially the entitlement attitude. You think of the world as owing you something. I'm entitled to this. I want this. I should be getting this. You think that you're unappreciated. You're resentful. And I've got a funny story about this one too. So we had just moved, and this was my senior year of high school. So it felt kind of silly because we were moving like a few blocks away. So it was like not even a move. We could have literally like just moved all of our stuff in our van, like just done trips. And I wanted a bed frame because my parents, they really liked using storage under the beds, and so they would have our bed frames up on cinder blocks. And I did not like that. I was like, this is ghetto. Like, I hate hitting my foot on this. This hurts. Like, I just was done. I was done with that lifestyle. And so I told them I want a bed frame. Like I want a real bed frame. And I had one picked out on Amazon. I thought it looked cute, and my dad's kind of interior designer like I am, like he loves the aesthetic of things. So he was all for it. And my mom said, "Why would you get a bed frame? I'm not getting a bed frame." And I was like, "Do you want one?" And she's like, "No." I was like, "Then maybe that's why you're not getting one?" Like, what? So for the longest time, I slept with just the mattress on the floor because I said, I am not going to sleep with some other bed frame. I want this one or I want nothing. All or nothing child. You can see how the type of teenager I was. But I just was like, why? Like, why won't she give me this? Like, this is crazy. The thing is, and I'm not going to go deep into this, but my mom has had this life that's led her to disappointment. She didn't really get to have a lot of one-on-one time with her parents. She was just in the position she happened to be in with her family of origin. She had a lot of things that she wanted, a lot of needs that never got realized. And so that led her to think, well, I want things, but I don't always get what I want. Why should other people? And I mean, she doesn't necessarily like apologize for the bed frame thing. I don't think she has to, but I've realized she has needs because of things that she hasn't been given before, and that's why she'll act the way that she does. So anyways, those are just 2 of the 4 boxes. You can check out our website for the other 4, or for the other 2. They're really great boxes. I've loved. I think for me, just in sharing those stories, it's helped me see why we do what we do and what gets in the way of seeing people as people. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. So I've been talking a lot.
I mean, growing up, I didn't know these things. I just learned this principle, I think it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, when I learned that, I started to ponder about my whole life. I was like, oh, yeah, I see myself in that box, in that specific situation. And I think, like you said, I didn't realize my parents had their own needs and desires for themselves and for me. I remember growing up, I wanted a Vespa. And I remember telling my dad, "What, you had it when you were like even younger than me." So I used like the opposite strategy. It's like, I want to have the same thing you had, even more. And I was telling him, "What, your dad bought your Vespa, why can't you buy a Vespa for me?" And then it took me, back then I didn't understand it, but it took a couple months to understand the reason why he didn't want to buy me a Vespa, because he thought it was not safe, for the street that we were living at that time, the traffic. So for me, when I was in the I deserve box, for me, now that I know this principle, I could understand. I realized that like you said, it takes, first of all, you need to forgive, and you need to understand, and kind of think as your parents think, if that makes sense. But I think I was able to understand that because my parents took the time to explain to me the why. And I think that's very important. It's at least in my life, that the why, it's a very important element for me as I see people as people.
I can see that. I love that. And I think that really goes along perfectly with the Arbinger Institute's the influence pyramid. And so all of what we're talking about currently and what I'll be talking about is found within the book The Anatomy of Peace, which is like, it's a fictional story, but it applies the elements or the lessons that we're talking about really well in that book. So it's written like a fictional story, but it's about real interesting models, if that makes sense. Anyways, so an important part of getting out of the box is recognizing that you're in the box in the first place. And recognizing the signs of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit I deserve-y, or I'm feeling better than, or I'm feeling the other two boxes are worse than or need to be seen as. And so, like Kallie said, those will be on our website. We won't talk about those here, but it's recognizing what characteristics or habits you're doing that represent those boxes. And so the influence pyramid is made up of 6 different levels. You start from the bottom and work your way up. So if you can imagine a pyramid, a triangle, the bottom is the biggest part, and that's where you should be spending most of your time. So the first level of the pyramid is getting out of the box and obtaining a heart at peace. So we talk about in the Anatomy of Peace, they talk about having a heart at war or a heart at peace. When your heart is at war, you're in the box and you're very contentious, and you're actively or even passively fighting that battle with the other person. And when your heart is at peace, you're recognizing the role that you play in that situation. Maybe you're also recognizing what things are not going right, even if they're not necessarily your actions. But that's the first step, getting out of the box and obtaining a heart at peace. The second level up from that is building relationships with others who have influence. And so in Callie's example, something that you could have done, or maybe you did do subconsciously, was build the relationship with your dad because of the contentious relationship with your mom. And so because they have a relationship with each other, he can help you see in your mom what you may not see, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that a lot.
And I think that's an important step, because the step right after that is building the relationship with that person. It can be really difficult, even if I have a heart at peace towards the person. If I'm working towards that, it can be really difficult to build the relationship with them, because I may still be seeing the issues that they have, that I think that they have. And so if we first build the relationship with others who have influence, you're more easily able to see the good qualities of that person that you're in that battle with. Does that make sense?
I love that.
Hopefully everyone's following along. So going back, getting out of the box, obtaining heart at peace, building relationships with others who have influence, building the relationship with that person. So then actively going into working on that relationship, having a heart at peace, being able to see that person as a person and not an object. And then the next step is listen and learn from that person. So it's hearing them out and learning from their experiences, learning from their opinions or their thoughts about maybe the situation between you two, or just their thoughts in general about life and anything like that. And then the next level above that is teach and communicate. So that's the part where we're actively reaching out and teaching different principles, or teaching your own thoughts and ideas, and communicating those in an appropriate and healthy manner. And then the last element of the period, the smallest element, is correction. So we spend the least amount of time correcting people and then the most amount of time getting out of the box and obtaining a heart at peace with them. So the first 5 levels of the pyramid are what we call helping things go right. And the last one, the 6th one, correction, is dealing with things that are going wrong. And so we want to spend the most amount of time working on helping things go right in the relationship rather than dealing with the quote unquote problem.
So it's more preventative than reparative.
Yeah.
You're building the relationship, helping things go right, like it says. And then when things do inevitably go wrong, you're there with the correction, with the gentle correction.
Right. Yeah. And I think what happens a lot with just relationships in general, but we're talking about the parent-child relationship. I think what can happen a lot with the parent-child relationship is that parents will be quick to correct their child, or children will be quick to correct their parents without actually working to see their parent as a person, themselves, see the parent or the child, whoever's POV that you have at that moment. But if you're not first seeing them as a person and seeing them as somebody to be loved and someone to build a relationship with, someone that is meaningful enough to you to do that, then you're not going to have any real influence over them. And I think at the end of the day, you have to evaluate what's more important: correcting them and being quote unquote right, or having a relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. But what's more important?
Yeah. And that reminds me, you mentioned this. I think this is the problem when parents try to set boundaries or even routines or rules with their children, and they fight, is because they are correcting them rather than building their relation. They're trying to fix what's going wrong rather than work and focus on the things that are going right. And I want to read a quote from this book wrote by Alfie Kohn. It's called Unconditional Parenting. And in this book, he says I think it's a very interesting point. He says, when parents not only avoid the temptation to rely on control, but also go out of their way to help children experience a sense of autonomy, these children are more likely to do what they're asked and less likely to misbehave. And I think this goes back to what Savannah was explaining. If parents allow their children, and if they allow themselves first to see their children as people and not objects, they allow their children as well to see themselves as people. Hope that makes sense.
So like parents are teaching their children to see themselves, the children, as people?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Because sometimes, maybe when you're a child, you see, oh man, I can tell that my mom is getting upset at me. They're kids. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. They're trying to deal with their emotions. I do think sometimes they might think that they're the object. I feel children could sense, oh man, I feel that my mom doesn't want to spend time with me because maybe they need to do something else. I know I felt that way. Sometimes I feel that way. Even now, I feel, okay, I don't want to be no burden. I don't want to tell my friends to hang out because maybe they need to do something else. So I feel that I see myself as object. But I think Alfie Kohn made a good point. If parents allow their children to express themselves, that will build the relationship. And then, like Savannah said, you build the relation with your friends. Well, you build the relation with your friends first, and then you build the relation with your child. And then you teach, you communicate, and then you correct. But that's the end. Like, that's the last step. And I think for me, it was very surprising to understand that correct and correction was the last thing I had to do. Because I tend to correct before I build the relationship.
A lot of us do.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to work with children here in my college experience, and I noticed when I was trying to correct too much without understanding why they were doing the things they were doing, it didn't go well.
And I really like that quote, because parents will direct their children or ask their children to do something, but if the child doesn't really understand why they're doing that thing, even if they physically obey and do it, if they don't understand, they're going to be extrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
And so in the future, they may not be motivated at all to do that, whatever that thing is. Kind of like having college roommates who don't do the dishes. If they don't, if your roommate wasn't raised understanding why dishes should be done or the bathroom should be clean or whatever, then when they come to college and live with you, they're not going to be doing those things. And so it's important to teach our children to be intrinsically motivated, to understand, to have that motivation come from within, not having an external force not influencing, but kind of forcing them. So if our way to motivate our children to obey or to do something is by you'll be grounded or you don't get to go do this or whatever, then they'll be extrinsically motivated is my point. We want them to understand the why, like you said, Erica.
I like with this book, Unconditional Parenting, a big theme of it is that we want our children to be good people, not just do what we ask. And so I think the influence pyramid and this book go hand in hand so well, because you're seeing the person as a person, and like you said, you're inviting the child to see themselves as a person. And if you don't do that, they're only going to know what they've been told to do rather than see, oh, this is actually what I want. Like you've been talking about motivation. If kids aren't wanting to do things for the right reasons, they're gonna, like you said, when they've lost that pressure to do whatever was right, they'll cease to do it. And I've seen that there are people who act very differently when they come to college than when they used to at home. And I thought, so you didn't actually learn, you know, like you were doing what you were doing for either, you know, validation or, you know, my parents would kill me if they knew I was doing whatever, you know. It's like, well, that's a threat. That means your parents aren't allowing you to actually choose, and you don't know why you're choosing what you're choosing. So I think good points.
I don't think that I don't think you're saying this, but I also don't think that allowing your children to have the choice to choose the right thing necessarily means you're open to them choosing the wrong thing, if that makes sense. It's about teaching them the why they should do the right thing.
And the thing, you know, it has to be age appropriate. Like I wouldn't, you know, let my 3 years old say, hey, you know, if you want to jump off this building, it's your choice. You know, you can jump or you can, you know, definitely has to be age appropriate. And you can actually remind me of a story when I was 13 or 14. I was in high school and I was invited to this party, and I knew it was not a good environment. So I talked with my dad, and my dad was like, well, I think you shouldn't go because of this. So he kind of explained me the reason why he thought it was not a good choice to make. And then I think he didn't say don't go. He said, this is the reason why I think you shouldn't go. So for me, it's like a no. But, you know, it's your choice. If you want to go, I'll drive you there. And then I thought about it for a couple of days. And then I decided not to go because I knew my dad was right. And, you know, there were things that also happened growing up that I didn't listen to my dad, even though he didn't agree with what I was doing. But now, you know, looking back, I think that experience and my parents allowed me to, you know, I'm talking when I was 15. Again, it's not when I was 10 or 8. But when I was growing up, my parents allowed me to understand how to make a decision. Really helped me, like you were saying, to become, I hope, a good, you know, person. So I really like that. And that goes along with what Alficon said also in another chapter. He mentioned that the way kids learn to make good decisions is by making decisions, not just by obeying. Or directions.
I like that point a lot. You learn when you've taken a wrong turn by taking the wrong turn. I've seen I've heard this story where there was a fork in the road and these people were driving on the road and they got this very clear impression to go one way, this, like, I think the left side, and they went, and it was a dead end. And both people in the car were like, okay, that was kind of weird. Like, why were we just told to go in a dead end? And they had doubts on which way was right. They weren't sure if they were going on the right path. But as they went back and went on the right path, they realized, well, now we know that the left was wrong. We have no doubts about that. We don't have to worry about this path being right because we know it's right, because we've done the other one and it didn't work. And so I think you made a really good point saying that doesn't mean that we just let our kids do whatever. Yeah. But I also think, you have to make decisions in order to practice making good ones. Mm-hmm. And you said, being developmentally appropriate. That's where parents want to create some scaffolding for their kids, provide a safe space for children to make decisions, and not make it where the stakes are super high. Because you wouldn't want your kids to do something that they're going to regret forever because you gave them the opportunity to choose at 10 rather than 17 or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think all these things are like a case by case basis with each child. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we can't say absolutely. I have 4 children, all of them can make this kind. They can all be like this and they can all do this.
No.
It depends on the child, their temperament, their personality. It depends on the circumstances of the family, you know. I think it has to be a conscious decision. It shouldn't just be flippant.
Yes.
I really like what you, Savannah, said. I think, it's not a one rule applied to every single child, because every family is different. First of all, the relationship also between parents and children are different. You might have, a different relation with your first child than the second child. So I think it's very important that we take these principles that we discussed today, we ponder about them, and then we apply them based on our family situations, on our, children and our personality traits and all of that. Mm-hmm. So thank you guys for joining us. I really enjoyed talking about the parent-child relationship. Even if we don't have kids yet, I think this principle could really help us to become better parents in the future. I really enjoyed working with you guys for these first 4 episodes because I really, really care about relationships. I think the relationship I have with you and the relationships I have with my family, my friends, really, really changed my life, because the relationships really helped me to understand more about myself, to understand more about how I need to relate with people, how I need to care for them, love them. And I think I couldn't, to be honest, live this life without connecting with people and without having relationships with my friends.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that we have so much good material to teach us on how to be better people in our relationships, because I need it. I've gone through growth, but I could do more, and so I'm so grateful that I have the people in my life, including you two, who are able to channel the good that they see in me. And I have so many good examples to look up to. I'm blessed in my relationships for the good that's there and the good they bring out in me. And so I'm just blessed all around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this experience. Working on this podcast with you guys has been great, and like you said, our relationship is very meaningful to me as well. And I don't know, relationships are some of the most important things to ever happen to us in this human experience.
Yeah.
And to be able to take care of them and to know how to take care of them and cultivate special and meaningful relationships in many different ways, like as we've discussed in these episodes, with our parents, with spouses, with friends, with dating, with everybody. It's been a really cool experience, and we hope that this has been influential or informational for you guys. Please let us know in the comments or on our Instagram or website what you guys think about this podcast, if we should do more episodes in the future, what those topics might be, maybe, or if you'd like to see more of us in general. And this is the Head Over Feels. Thanks for listening to this episode of Head Over Feels. If you want more resources or information, check out our Instagram and website, both links in the description of this video.